Hello and welcome back to the Girls of Marketing podcast. Oh my gosh, it's been a while, hasn't it? I'm literally sitting here in the studio now and it feels so alien. So I know that you might not be expecting this episode, but we wanted to share a really cool update with you and just chat a little bit about what's been happening with Girls in Marketing since the last season of our podcast, which genuinely feels like such a long time ago. We've been busy behind the scenes reimagining what the show is so that we can bring you as much value as possible. So starting this season, we're going to be doing bi-weekly episodes with a fresh focus on everything that's shaping the world of marketing today. So you can expect deep dives into new campaigns, industry insight reports, the latest trends, and all important algorithm updates that will keep you and keep us on our toes. Every so often, we're going to also welcome some special guests to share their stories, campaigns, and expertise as well. So this format is designed to keep you excited, informed, and inspired about our industry. So let's dive in.
Why do I feel nervous?
Why do you feel nervous?
I don't know.
I feel like my heart's beating a little bit because we haven't been back for so long.
No, I'm excited to be back, but I don't know. I just feel like I've got butterflies at the thought of like a new season.
Okay, new season, new set.
Yeah.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
So new format.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the new format.
Okay.
Why are we doing it?
So, what are we in season 6?
We've had so many seasons.
Yeah. So I think we're heading into season 6 of the podcast, and obviously we've grown so much as a brand, as people, as marketers, as a community. We've done a lot, not only on the podcast, just in general. So yeah, I thought we just kind of thought it was time to mix it up and do something a bit different, didn't we?
Yeah.
We've obviously always had guests on the podcast and, had episodes of just kind of us chatting and a bit of a blend of stuff. But we've also recently kind of increased the number of kind of things like newsletters and like updates on like trends in the industry. And like we've seen such a great response to that, haven't we? So we've kind of decided that let's bring some of that into the pod format.
Yeah. And I think as well, we did that survey on Instagram and we asked people what sort of episodes do you like? And we kind of seen from the background of listeners, we weren't really getting more listeners just because it was guests. And people actually like what we have to say, which I know we're kind of like, okay then. But I do think, we still will have guests sometimes if they've got something really great to say. And we have had amazing guests before. So it's not to say that we're not going to have guests, but it's kind of like a nice, more of a chat sort of vibe. We said we want to bring more conversation and allow people to feel like they're in the know with marketing because it's quite overwhelming, I think. I mean, even the thought of sitting down and doing this episode, thinking about reflecting upon 2024 is overwhelming, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I think also part of it is that, we want to make it so that it's a little bit more reactive and current as well. So, bringing out these episodes bi-weekly and being able to kind of provide our thoughts and just share updates on things that hopefully will help marketers have a really easy, concise, digestible way of catching up on what's happening in the industry. I think, another thing that we hear from our community and our audience quite a lot is that, trying to stay up to date with everything, with trends, with updates in the industry, with recent campaigns, with changes to regulations, whatever it might be. And industry news, whatever, it's a lot to do. And it's there's so many different sources. So we just want to try and create a little bit of a space to give a bit of a roundup and then opportunities for people to kind of go away and look at those things. Yeah. But it's just a different way for us to do it, isn't it? So I think that's why I'm a little bit nervous. Not that I don't feel like it's going to be good. I think it's going to be amazing. It's just a little bit of a shake-up, isn't it?
Yeah. So I also want to make sure we cover the fact that it's not just going to be kind of B2C trends. We're not just going to sit here and talk about TikTok every week or every other week. It's going to be more about actually what's going on in marketing because at the end of the day, it's good to stay current with what's trending on TikTok, but it's not relevant for everyone. There's so much happening in the B2B space. There's so much happening with new platforms. And I think there are tons of other resources and places that you can find information about TikTok trends. I'm not going to say we're the most current with TikTok trends. So maybe if you want to know that, don't listen to the podcast. But any other kind of marketing campaigns, cool stuff that's happening, you're going to be able to listen.
Yeah,
right here.
definitely. And we're also going to be really keen on getting input and insight from the community as well. Like, what we would also like to do is really hear your thoughts on the episodes, on the new podcast format, hear if there's anything that you are particularly enjoying hearing us talk about. You know, we're always keen to like sort of tweak the format of the pods to make sure that it's what's best for the listeners. So we want to hear from you guys as to exactly what it is that you want to catch up on, and, you know, how we can add that little bit of, you know, joy, hopefully, a bit of entertainment maybe, but also just that kind of insight that you really want to know, like how we can pack it with as much value as possible for you and what you want to hear.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about last season, because obviously this is a bit of a surprise sort of like episode that people might not be expecting. So I think it'd be good to chat about like our favourite episodes from last season, because there's so many and tons of people. I love the fact that when we've had guests on, I've been able to build our network as well. So I loved Jo Bird's episodes.
Yeah.
She's literally like one of the nicest people ever. I was recently in Amsterdam at Spotlight Conference, and she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here as well. And it was so fun. And I think loads of people who were at Spotlight Conference in Amsterdam, which was Semrush's first ever conference, it was so nice to like see people, and being able to do the podcast and meeting those people has been like amazing. And there were so many episodes. Do you have any like favorite ones?
It's hard. I feel like I have so many favorite ones from the whole of our, you know, past 5 seasons. But I think, last season we had a real mixed bag, didn't we?
Yeah.
We had what I think was interesting was we had John from Surreal, didn't we? Who's like the funny marketing mastermind behind Surreal. And then we also had Richard from Monzo as well. And again, Monzo, another funny brand. And I think what I found really interesting was like kind of the different take that they both took on those episodes as well.
Yeah.
I think that with John, what we got was like, obviously, like he's really funny, and like as him as a person, like he's really comedic, and like that kind of really came through in the episodes, and it was like a really good one. I found myself cracking up during it. Like it was a really, really funny episode. I think I also enjoyed the Monzo episode because I think I kind of expected maybe it to be exactly the same type of episode, but it wasn't. But it was so insightful and really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it gave us like a really good deep dive into the workings of Monzo, their brand, their tone of voice, like how they make that work on social, and like why it works for them, why it also probably doesn't work for other brands and stuff like that. So I think that was a really, really interesting kind of contrast in the way that those episodes both came out, but it was really, really good and really valuable.
Honestly, John makes me laugh so much. He actually is that funny, like in real life.
Yeah.
I remember when he come to the studio, he come and he just like, he just has his bag with him, and he walks into the studio, and I was like, hi. And he was like, hello. I was like, how was Jen? He was like, good, thanks, yeah. I was like, lovely. Okay, right. Let's get into the episode. And I think the whole time I was genuinely cracking up, like actually. And even at the end, like if you haven't listened to the episode, go and listen, because genuinely was one of the funniest conversations I've had. And I think the fact that he brings that sort of humor to his marketing as well. Like he is a really good copywriter as well, and like genuinely has a really good idea on like how to build a tone of voice.
Yeah.
And I think that was he is like as you think he is, which I think is so nice to kind of see someone doing that. And I agree with Monzo, because Richard had so much insightful stuff to say about how Monzo kind of connect the customer experience with the social media stuff. So really interesting. I think, you know, listeners now, you've got a bit of time to go back and like rewatch some of the episodes. Obviously, like check out those episodes. Also, like all of the other ones that we've done in between. So the team episodes as well. They were always like really fun to record. And also like, you know, we had so much value in them. Like I always really enjoyed that as well. So, you know, if you've got any time between now and when our season launches, like it's worth going and having a little listen for sure.
Definitely. And in terms of the listeners' most popular episodes?
Okay, so we had our Spotify Wrapped. This is something I wanted to speak about actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so Spotify Wrapped come out recently. Now, obviously, something that we're quite conscious of is that Spotify and people listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So we don't want to give no love to the Apple Podcast crew. But Spotify did us a Wrapped as a podcast. So these are some of the stats which I found were really interesting. Our most popular episode was with Anna Jones, which was the building your marketing career.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time you said this will be such a really good episode. And Anna's lovely. She's got so much to say, but she's not necessarily from like a huge brand. You know, she's worked with amazing brands before, but she's a consultant. She's on her own. She has her own agency. And I thought, yeah, this episode's going to be really great. But I think sometimes people think, oh, it's the big brands. They're going to bring in the numbers. You know, we've had huge brands on. But actually, her episodes was the most popular.
That was so valuable. Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And then in terms of gains for 2024, we had a 78% growth in listeners, 90% in streams, and 80% in followers.
Amazing.
Yeah. But in terms of people who follow us, I think there are people who still don't follow us. So please give us a little,
please
give us a little follow. I feel like such a, I feel like YouTube 2013, like hit the subscribe and the notification. But definitely give us a follow because then you'll be up to date with everything.
Yeah.
We had 85% new listeners. So we also might have new listeners of this episode as well.
Let's hope so.
Again, who've never heard of us before. So, you know, if you're new, welcome.
Yeah.
I feel like it's nice to have some new, I was going to say faces, but it's
ears.
Some
new ears.
Some new ears. So that was really nice to hear with like Spotify Wrapped and everything like that.
What about the charts? Like where did we sit?
Oh, well, so it kind of went crazy for a little bit. So Kira, who has now left Girls Marketing, but was our like head of creative, she took hold of the podcast strategy and did an amazing job of it. And what actually happened is we started reaching, which is crazy to me, like the business charts. So we were sitting with names like we talk about all the time. Grace Beverly, she's like our dream. Maybe this season she'll be
right
sat well, here or maybe there. I don't know, but potentially, maybe one day. We were sat with names like Stephen Bartlett, who's massive in podcasting as well. And I think for us, it's kind of quite surreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. As much as I definitely think we've got great stuff to say, maybe we don't give ourselves enough credit.
Yeah.
But we were up there with names. We peaked number 5 in the business charts.
Yeah.
Which was crazy in the UK. And then I think we sat for quite a while at like in the between like 13 and like 20, which again, for a small podcast.
It's competitive out there. So I feel like we can't underestimate how good that is. And obviously we couldn't do that without the listeners. So like, thank you so much to everyone who does tune in and listen to our episodes. And we're so grateful. Like I see posts all the time, like obviously people tagging Girls in Marketing on LinkedIn or on Instagram, you know, letting us know that they're listening to the podcast, like sharing their insights and their takeaways from the episodes. I love to see it. Like I absolutely love to see it when you're engaging and, you know, to see the kind of impact that the episodes have for people, whether it is that it's something that's relating to marketing career and it helps them to kind of make some decisions and choices about what they want to do and or whatever it is, or if they just find some sort of, you know, creative inspiration or they just literally like enjoy listening as an accompaniment to their working day. It's just so lovely to see how people enjoy listening to the podcast. So, you know, we're so grateful obviously to the listeners for that.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was earlier this year actually, I was in this office building and someone come up and was like, oh my gosh, you're from the Girls in Marketing podcast. And at that point I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, okay.
I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. You know, when you just kind of think, I don't know, I sometimes forget that people listen. Like, you know people are listening, but also it's like this sheer scope of things.
Yeah.
And then when people say like really nice things or when people say stuff like that, it's kind of like, it is genuinely lovely, but so surreal that like this is something that people genuinely listen to and find interesting.
Yeah, I know, who'd have thought.
Yeah.
So obviously then, as this is like a bit of an intro, a bit of a tease for what's kind of coming next season, we kind of said, didn't we, that we'd do a little bit of like, just like a mini reflection on the past year. Obviously our last episode was kind of earlier this year, like maybe 6 months ago or so. So there's been stuff that's even happened since then. And with the format shifting more towards kind of like looking at what's happening in the industry, kind of what campaigns are going on, how brands are like working and you know, things that marketers can be looking to do with, you know, their strategies and stuff. We thought it'd be good to do a bit of a reflection on, I guess, some of the headlines of what's happened in 2024, some of the stuff that's kind of stood out to us. Just like as a bit of a recap, didn't we? I think that's a kind of a good way to kick things off.
Yeah, well, since we've been in the studio, I have had a Charlie XCX Brat summer for for sure. She was my
Yes.
top artist on Spotify.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't know how that happened. Genuinely,
That is interesting.
I've loved listening to it, but I also, when it come up on Spotify, I was kind of like, is this real?
Yeah.
Like, is this happening? But it did, and I think it was Apple, one of her singles, and then 360 was the other one, which is like huge. But I feel like it's been a very green summer in last few months because we've had Wicked come out, which I've watched. Have you been to the cinema to see it?
I've still not seen it. No,
So
I've still not seen it. No, I haven't. I'm excited to see it, but I've had like with a little one, it's kind of like picking what I see when we go to the cinema. And I actually did have the opportunity to go the other week, but my partner won and we went to see Gladiator 2, which I actually did enjoy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I doubt that he'd want to go and see Wicked. So.
No, I mean, I got close to convincing him, but I didn't win, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been very green, definitely. And I think that Wicked has been like, it kind of was like Barbie campaign, but like even bigger.
Yeah.
Like the brand collaborations that we've seen from the Wicked movie have just been crazy, haven't they? Like,
but did
so
you know
many.
it was only a part 1? So it's
know.
not the whole of Wicked.
Did I know that? I feel like I did know it. So there's going to be a whole new thing.
A whole new campaign will be happening next year. So
Amazing.
I love all the campaigns for it. And I booked tickets to go and see it with my sister. She's literally 11 and she's Wicked obsessed. We went to see it in the theatre in London last year. And then like my mum and my nan, and we kind of had like a girly evening on the day it came out on the 22nd of November. And it was really, really nice. But I didn't realise, we sat in the cinema and my auntie was like, you do realise it's only part 1? So I'd seen all of the marketing for it.
Yeah.
I'd loved it. We talked about it. Everyone had been talking about it. And I was like, oh, it's only part 1.
I must admit, I don't necessarily know if I knew that. And if I did, I feel like I only found out a bit later on. I don't know whether necessarily that came out through the marketing very much. That it was
Which is
just a part 1.
interesting.
Maybe they went, maybe that wasn't the intention. Maybe it was just like hype around Wicked, release part 1, and then people are going to stick around for part 2, I guess.
True.
But
yeah, it was really good. And I think the marketing for it was insane because I was in New York just before it was coming out.
Yeah.
And I was walking the streets literally by the Empire State Building, and there was an Aldo, which is like a footwear kind of shop. I wasn't super interested or anything in that, but I seen it and it was wicked and it was amazing. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I went into Ulta Beauty as well, which again we don't have in the UK. But I love Ulta, love Sephora. Any American brands I love.
Yeah.
Went in and they had a whole section that was like wicked, and it was huge. I do think that there was a lot more collaborations in like America than necessarily in the UK. We obviously seen a lot of them. I think a lot of them went under the radar as well because there was one that was with Lego, and it was like a mini Alphabet and Glinda, which are the two main characters from Wicked, which was cool, but I don't think they made such a big deal of it. I think there was quite a few brands that
did like low-key
stuff, but I think... So if we compare like Barbie last year to like, I would say like Wicked this year, do you think one is bigger than the other?
I don't know. It's so hard, isn't it? Because I think the standout thing for Barbie for me was that it felt like the first time in a long time that people really got into a hype over a film coming out in the cinema.
Yeah.
I feel like it really helped to kind of like revive cinema visits. Like, I do think particularly, the pandemic and just generally, the rise of Netflix and streaming services and all that sort of stuff. Like, I feel like Barbie gave that like resurgence to like going to the cinema, having that experience. And I think that, the huge campaign around it, I do believe did pay off because I do think that they like ticket sales, like box office sales were huge. I think that also was helped by the Barbenheimer, the Oppenheimer released at the same time. That was like, that made it even more interesting because it was almost that like box office title race type of thing, and people were really interested in which one's going to do better. There was kind of that crossover between the two. So I don't know. I do think Wicked's potentially been bigger in that they've done more collabs, but like I would say just because I feel like Barbie was like the first for a long time that was like a really big marketing push on a big box office film, I probably preferred that and found it a bit more exciting. But yeah, I do think they've both been huge.
I think they both lent into the like nostalgia sort of marketing.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that a lot more now with
100%.
tons of brands. Barbie definitely did because Barbie's quite like nostalgic for people anyway. But I think Wicked really tried to go down that angle of like nostalgia. So I love that that's kind of like more what brands are doing these days. But But in terms of like other things that have happened this year, there's been loads of stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about something that's not as pretty, which is like Google's search generative stuff that's going on right now.
Mhm.
Yes, it's not sparkly and glittery and amazing, like Wicked and Barbie and all stuff like that, but it's super important and it's changing the landscape of search.
Yeah.
So in terms of things that have happened, you'll kind of now notice that when you search something on Google, there'll be an AI overview at the very top of Google of most searches, especially the ones that are more informational. So if you're looking like, for example, how to cook pasta or something like that, typically you would have seen maybe a featured snippet, which would be like a kind of quick overview of like 1, 2, 3, and that will have taken directly from a website. And then you'll have the organic results and maybe not on that sort of search and ads, but you have the ads as well. Now, what's happening is Google's kind of taking information from multiple different sources and creating its own version. Now, don't get me wrong, it's slightly controversial because people are saying, how is this impacting, SEO and search? Because featured snippets, I remember, used to be like, yes, if we can get a featured snippet, that would be amazing. Whereas now, because it's kind of leaning more into the AI overviews, it feels quite overwhelming for people to kind of see that.
Yeah. Do you think though then that like, so people are feeling like it's quite overwhelming because like you say, it was almost like if you could make a featured snippet, you almost had some control over whether you could do that, but it feels almost like that control has been taken away now that it's kind of AI powered. Do you think that's the case, or do you think there's still things that marketers can be doing to feature in those AI those AI bits?
Yeah, I think there's still things that people can do, but I do think that potentially it could be harder because also what is amazing about it is it's individual to you. So whereas before a featured snippet would be, if you were a featured snippet, you were 0 on Google, you're going to be showing up to all of the volume that show up at that point. Whereas if I searched how to cook pasta versus you, it might be different depending on our preferences, depending on our past search history. So it's really good. And actually for the end consumer is what you want, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
We've seen it with TikTok as well. So now when you search TikTok, if it's a informational sort of thing, if you're searching TikTok, it will come up with an overview at the very top, which again is impacting what videos people click on, is impacting, search in general. So it's not just Google that it's happening on. What I think is great though is you still got your people also ask. So even if you're not really showing up in the top kind of search results,
there's still opportunities.
There's still tons of opportunity. So by no means does it mean you're not going to be showing up at the top. And if you're sourced in an AI overview, that is amazing as well, because obviously you're going to get the traffic from it.
Yeah.
So I think if I was going to give advice to people, it's don't be disheartened by it. Be excited by it, but do some research because there genuinely is a lot going on. And it's moving really quickly. I mean, we say that anyway with marketing, but it feels like it's moving so quick.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when we're back with our next episodes and it's 2025 and we're talking about it again, there'll be more updates, which is the whole point of this format, isn't it? It's the whole point of this format is that it's not always going to be all the glitzy glam campaigns and stuff, because although it's nice to talk about, it's going to also be the important updates and the stuff that marketers need to know and need to implement and be aware of and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a mix of both, isn't it? Definitely. I mean, I think it's similar in the world of social media. I know we said we're not just going to be talking about like TikTok and stuff like that, but like across the board, I think there's been like a lot of updates in socials. Obviously it was last year that Threads was introduced. I think we've continued to see a lot of, just kind of a lot of turbulence around X, a lot of controversy. Their kind of usership, is that a word? Their users definitely decreased. And so then there's also been the emergence of other platforms like Blue Sky and stuff like that. And it's like, where are people going? Yeah. The people who used to kind of flock to Twitter, like where are they going now? Like it's almost like who's going to take that lead and who's going to kind of become that alternative platform. I mean, I know Threads is still growing, and I think there was kind of a lot of skepticism around whether that would just be like one of those short-lived Clubhouse type platforms, but it's definitely continued to grow. Personally speaking, it's not necessarily one that I use a lot, but I'm not reflective of the whole population. But there's been a lot of change, hasn't there, in that respect?
I think with Threads, it's always going to do relatively well because it's backed by
Meta.
Meta. It's backed by a big, like a huge corporation. So if you compare it to something like Clubhouse, it's never gonna be like that because Clubhouse was made by individuals. Like they had acquisition offers, and then the reason that Clubhouse died was because Twitter introduced Spaces. And I think the difference with Threads is that it's backed by Meta. I haven't personally got on the Threads train in terms of like as a consumer. I also don't really know many people who have. Now, what I do know is marketers who are, but I don't really know if I know normal people. My normal friends who work in jobs other than marketing, they don't even know anything about Threads. Really.
I would agree. I feel like that's the same with me. I think in socials, in other ways as well, I do feel like there's been quite a lot of, we've been seeing one platform do one thing and then it feels quite similar to something that another platform's already doing, the rise of kind of video on LinkedIn and just there's been a lot of updates, but I wouldn't say it's a lot of like new. It's like, and, there's been certain updates that have been like really useful, like long awaited stuff, like, the ability, for example, on TikTok to add like a cover photo to like your video or like just little things that people have been waiting on for ages. And I think that, those sorts of things have been nice little features to have, but I wouldn't say there's been anything like massively groundbreaking on those platforms as far as I can remember.
I don't think so.
Although I'm racking my brain for 12 months and I'm like...
No, I don't think so. And it's interesting because, so it's kind of like, okay, well, what happens next? I think when we come back in the new year, we want to do like what happened in 2025. So stay tuned for that. But I think, where do social platforms go? Like, what is the next step? Is it that, what we've done this year is those small changes? Is it continuing those small changes? Or is there going to be something crazy different? I don't know. The new year's going to bring some good stuff for sure.
Definitely. I think we've also seen, changes and interesting updates, interesting kind of events in different spaces of marketing as well, like from like a influencer creator perspective. I think there's been, a lot of talk around these topics. Obviously at kind of the back end of 2023, I remember there was conversations around how people declare their ads more clearly, particularly like creators, also including like founders who talk about their own companies and products, like making that clearer, like adhering to ASA guidelines more and stuff like that. And I think that there's been a continued trend in consumers becoming more, I just think more aware of like when they're being influenced, and I think that there's been more of a focus for brands working with like smaller influencers or like more niche influencers, moving away from the Kim Kardashians and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not to say that they don't still work with brands, because obviously they do, and people will continue to always work with Kim Kardashian. But I think there's been more of a focus in that space of like, authenticity, and I feel like that's such a buzzword, but, really working with brands who know their audience, know their niche, have a really good relationship with them to get the most out of those collabs. And then also things like what we've been seeing recently, we were talking about this just before, kind of like product placement kind of coming into place with like video and stuff, which is really interesting. Yeah,
honestly, I just thought that was crazy, but it makes sense because if you think that in the history of like TV, product placement has worked for God knows how long. But I was watching a Saffron Barker video. So Saffron Barker's a YouTuber. She does like lots of different things. It's quite generic sort of content, but like lifestyle, beauty, fashion, fitness, like that sort of thing. And she just kind of shares her life. And there was a video that was out, I think it was like a month ago or so now, not too long ago. And in the background of her video, it was like an AI billboard. So she was in her house, and on the background of her video was like an AI billboard for a foundation. And I at first thought that it was a picture, and then it started moving, and I was like, this is crazy. And then when I kind of flocked to LinkedIn to see what people were saying and see what people thought, there was like loads of conversation about it. And then I know recently in a video, I haven't watched it, but someone mentioned she's done it again. So I don't know if it's part of like a long-term collaboration. I'll be honest, I don't think that she's ever spoken about that brand before. She might have, but I don't watch her content religiously, so I'm not sure. But it's really interesting to see that happening because it makes sense. Product placement has always been there in TV. We've
I think
seen
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's like product placement has always been there, but I think in TV, I mean, obviously in TV, it's been, sometimes you'll have it in like film and TV where it is in the background, but usually it's like that person's like maybe using a product or something like that. But I think it's interesting the way that it was built into that video was like, it was just an ad like in the background. And if I remember rightly, no real like reference to it. It was just popped up and left.
That was the thing as well. So obviously with traditional product placement, it would be, you would have a can of something on the side, or you would have, if it, for example, it was a makeup brand, so you'd have the piece of makeup physically with you. What I thought was strange about this was it wasn't the physical item, it was an AI billboard.
Yeah, it felt more like, almost like these people are watching this video anyway, so let's have a billboard, almost like the way you would have like around the sides of like a football pitch or something.
Yeah.
If you were watching a football match and then you've got like, I don't know, like beer ads or something going around because people are already tuned in. It kind of felt like that, didn't it? Which I feel like you say, it does make sense. I just think because it's so new to this type of content, it's like, will that continue? Will it land well? It's an interesting one, isn't it? But I love seeing these kind of, evolutions in the way that brands work with creators and stuff like that. I think it's really creative. I think, it's experimenting with what works. There's kind of been, a lot of experimentation, I think, from brands across the board this year. And, some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. There's also been, I think, some, campaigns from brands that, I don't necessarily have any particular opinions on, but I know that like, whether it's just in the marketing space on LinkedIn that people have had like strong opinions about, but I do also think I've heard it kind of span beyond that. Campaigns like the Jaguar rebrand.
Yeah.
What was the Burger King one?
What was it
the
called?
one having the burger after she'd given birth. That one.
Bundles of Joy. That was called. Yeah.
And I do think there've been a few campaigns that like regardless of whether people have loved them or not really liked them, like they've been huge. There's been so much conversation about them. So again, interesting to see people's take on those sorts of things as well, and brands doing big bold things and seeing how they land. I love that.
What I've really loved this year, talking about like big bold things, is more B2B brands leaning into influencer stuff.
Yes.
We're seeing it so much. I mean, kind of more recently, we've seen it with SEMrush, who did an influencer kind of weekend where they took influencers in like the marketing and kind of business and digital space out on like a double-decker bus in London, took them around loads of places, did really cool things with them. And then we also seen it a lot with the Hootsuite social trends reports, which happened. I was involved in that campaign, really loved it. And it's just totally different. I mean, if you're thinking traditionally of releasing a report or a white paper, so many people would just think, oh, we'll just put out a web landing page with a form on it. We'll just put it on socials, say, download this white paper. But Hootsuite really brought it up like quite a few notches. And I respect them for that, because I think we've typically thought of B2B as quite boring, as not very interesting, and
as
also
like kind of behind B2C as well.
Exactly. And I definitely think that there's a lot more that you have to lose with B2B. So campaigns are a little bit more risky, because it's kind of like, okay, we're going to spend money on an influencer, but maybe people haven't really worked with that influencer in that space before. There's not as much understanding as maybe there is in the B2C landscape, but it's interesting to see that people are doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also ties in for me to that thing of, B2B brands leaning into influencer, because they're acknowledging that like just because you're B2B, you're still speaking to people, getting influencers involved, you're influencing individuals within organizations. And I think that ties into the rise in kind of like employee generated content we've seen this year as well. Again, like B2B brands leaning into EGC and like using their employees as spokespeople for their organization, and not just from a marketing perspective, in terms of kind of using them to, demonstrate their kind of like their value proposition as an employer and all of that sort of stuff. Like there's so much to be said for how your employees can influence your brand's perception. And I think that those two kind of like tie in quite nicely together. And it's been really nice to see, I think, more B2B brands allowing that freedom for, working with the influencers or allowing their employees to have a little bit more kind of freedom around that. Because I think, again, historically, B2B brands have been quite sort of like, guarded with that sort of stuff. They need to be corporate. They need to keep that really corporate tone of voice. But actually, I think releasing that kind of tight hold on that sort of thing can only be can only be beneficial for them, I do think. So I think it'll be interesting to see the continued kind of evolution of B2B in that sense.
Yeah, I definitely think you obviously mentioned EGC as well, so employee generated content. I think that's going to be one to watch for sure for next year. We've seen it huge this year. There's like quite small brands that are getting involved more in EGC, but I have also seen a bit of controversy around it as well, because there was that, I don't know if you remember the video that went viral on TikTok, and I think it was a marketing agency in maybe like Australia, and it was a dance, and it was something and something else. I can't remember. It's like that kind of tone. Oh, it's so
it's not
bad.
ringing any bells.
No, it was like I can't remember.
Oh, it was like, I know what you mean. Like, what was the words?
I can't remember what the words were.
And it'd be like,
but you get me from that. Like,
red shoes and a fancy bag, like that type of thing.
But did you see the controversy around it?
Oh no.
So I thought it was so fun.
I just thought it was a fun song.
Yeah,
I'm like
so
that vibing on TikTok.
I thought it was so fun, but it was actually, I think it was a marketing agency in Australia or something like that. And essentially there was like quite a lot of hate. So that, I think, shows the potential of how EGC can maybe go wrong sometimes, because what happened is obviously it went viral, it became a trend, but in the process, I think some of the people in the video got like hate or just online trolling. Naturally, it's going to happen with going viral. And then obviously what's happened is that person or those people haven't liked that, because why would you? It's not nice. And I think what's happened is, it's kind of shown the kind of bad side to EGC as well, is, okay, it's great to get involved with these things, but there is a potential for things to not go so well, which I think is scary. And I thought that trend was really fun and cute, but actually, you know, it had real implications for the people, not even the brand, the people that were in the video. So I think, you know, going into next year, it'll be interesting to see what that landscape looks like. And I know a lot of brands talked about that as a case study to say, you know, we should be careful about what we're putting online or how we position our staff or our team, because you've got to protect your team as well, especially with the likes of TikTok, whose algorithm is just on a mad one sometimes, and things go viral.
Sometimes it's really brutal. Like for me, I love consuming on TikTok. TikTok is wild. Like TikTok is like, get on the good side of TikTok, great, lovely, fluffy, friendly, absolutely amazing. Like accidentally stumble onto a not so friendly side of TikTok, and it's just like, I just don't want to be here. It's funny, I feel like a lot of people say that. So many people I know, like, you know, and they've got like, I don't know, like say followings on Instagram or LinkedIn, but they're just really scared to dip their toe in the water of TikTok. Having said that though, I would say that I do think LinkedIn is a really great space, especially for marketers. It's lovely. I would say that in the maybe the past 6 months of this year, I think I've seen certain rises in a little bit of like negativity on LinkedIn and like some not so pleasant conversations and stuff. And again, I think like, you know, I guess that's the case when any platform really takes off and more people start to use it and there's more opinions and more voices and stuff on there. But yeah, I think sometimes it's like a bit of like oh God, am I going to wade into an unpleasant side of LinkedIn as well? So let's hope that doesn't kind of start to happen, particularly in like the personal branding space. Yeah,
I think it's good to curate your feeds. I feel like it's something we've said quite a lot, but you know, if you're seeing videos or posts or something that you don't like, you know, either block it or report it or, you know, anything like that, because I do think it's so important to create and curate your own feeds. And, you know, if you're seeing stuff that you don't like, I have felt like that on LinkedIn sometimes. And I think that's because, as you say, the bigger a platform gets, the more likely it is to get people who are saying certain things, or, you know, your post gets to like the wrong side of LinkedIn or, you know, something like that. And I love it as a platform, but likewise with anything, there's always going to be a situation where, you know, it goes to a place and maybe you don't want it to reach that audience, because we all love the nice marketers who are, I love your post. And I don't like it when it's like the big wigs who are saying, oh, why are you talking about this? Or you know nothing. And it's not nice, but it's always going to happen. And I think you've got to kind of pull yourself together and say, I'm going to create my own feeds, and, you know, say to yourself, going forwards. But then also, I don't think those people should be on LinkedIn either, but it's kind of like how the platforms monitor that, because I always thought that with TikTok, you know, how do they monitor comments
abuse
and
trolling and all that.
nastiness
Yeah.
and trolling and stuff like that. So I think it'd be interesting to see that happening next year for sure. But I feel like we've covered a lot. We've talked for I mean
a while
now.
And before it, I was like, I'm so nervous. I don't know what we're going to say. So yeah, I feel like though this gives a really good kind of feel. Obviously, this is a lot more kind of unstructured and more ramblings, just about reflections on a whole year, which could obviously go on forever. But I think I'm excited for what the new season's going to bring. I'm really excited to be bringing like updates, like you say, potentially kind of the odd guests here and there, you know, some really exciting stuff, engaging with the community and really hearing what they want us to talk about on the pod. So excited for that next year. And, you know, obviously we don't want to leave you completely like high and dry, like, you know, bring a teaser and then just be like, right, okay, you've got to wait. So if you do want to engage with us, in the meantime, obviously we're on socials, go and follow us on socials, get involved with stuff. You know, we've just brought out 2 brand new courses. If you're interested in those, if you're looking to, I don't know, maybe start your 2025 off with a bang and, you know, you're thinking about kind of finding a new marketing job, progressing in your career, we've got 2 courses aimed at both of those things to really help you kind of, progress in the career space. Get involved, come and join our membership. Our members are so lovely, and just watching our membership grow and our members kind of get involved with stuff's amazing. So if you feel like you want more of this, but beyond the podcast, come and get involved. And then if not, wait for us and we'll be back soon.
Literally, I know, for sure. I want to add as well about sponsorship. So we obviously have this amazing podcast. We love doing it. And what the new format means is that we're able to have sponsors on like individual episodes, which is quite cool. So if you work for a brand or you are a brand that maybe has a cool event or a industry report or something that you think I want people to know, essentially what we're going to be doing is recording episodes on a Monday and they're going to be going out on the Thursday. So we want to create episodes that are filled with value. But if you've got something and you want to let our audience know, get in touch with us. You can email us with Girls in Marketing on our website. You can just go on, email us. We would love to hear from you because we work with some really cool brands and I know that there's loads of different stuff going on, whether it's an event, an industry white paper or anything.
Tool, like whatever it might be.
Literally anything. And we want to showcase our audience kind of new things that are always happening in the industry. So for sure, get in touch with us. But I'm excited for the new season and we'll get started in the new year.